It's midday and the world is bright enough to hurt. White on white, sun scattered in a million sharp crystals, the kind of cold that turns every breath into a small cloud that betrays you. Out here, the mountains don't hide their bones. Ridges cut clean lines across the sky. Shadows fall hard and blue. Sound carries strangely. A boot crunch can travel farther than a shout, and gunfire feels both close and far at the same time, like it's echoing inside the skull. The medic element drops into the shallow ravine because the ravine is the only place the wind isn't trying to tear their eyes out. And that's exactly where the trap closes. Rounds snap overhead with a dry, cracking sound. Fast, precise, not the sloppy panic of someone firing and praying. The first burst chews the lip of the ravine, throwing powder snow into the air like smoke. The second burst lands a fraction lower, and the third is lower still, walking toward the cluster of bodies that thought the cut in the terrain would protect them. A measuring tape made of bullets. Down! Down! The team leader yells, but the wind steals half the word. A medic with a Red Cross patch on his sleeve, painted over in gray because nothing is supposed to be obvious, drops flat, forearms sinking into snow. He doesn't look like a fighter. He looks like someone who knows how to keep hands steady while another human falls apart. That's why it works. It's a unit built to stop bleeding, not start it. The lead medic, Staff Sergeant Ruffy, thin face, frost in his eyebrows, has one job: keep them alive long enough to get them out. He crawls sideways, grabs the collar of the wounded teammate beside him, and drags him behind a half-buried rock that sticks out of the ravine wall like a blunt tooth. The wounded man makes a sound that isn't a scream because he's too disciplined for that, but it's close. Blood stains the snow under his hip. Bright red on white looks obscene. Another medic, younger, tries to return fire from the ravine edge. He angles his rifle up, shoulders tight, squeezes off 2 controlled shots. The enemy answers instantly. Not at the spot where his muzzle flashes, at the place he will be if he tries to move again. Rounds strike the rock above him with a vicious metallic ping, spraying chips and snow dust into his face. He flinches back and the weapon in the distance walks its fire a little closer, as if it's testing whether they've learned the lesson. Ruffy slaps his radio. Base, this is... The sentence dissolves into static so clean it feels manufactured. The sound isn't interference. It's a wall. He tries again. Base, we are... The channel goes dead in the middle of a syllable. Then nothing. Not even hiss. Blankness. Radio's gone. Someone shouts. Hand signals start. 3 fingers up. 2 taps on the helmet. A fist to stop movement. In training it's neat. Here, it's messy. The wind steals voices and the snow steals traction and fear steals time. More rounds crack overhead. A high shooter is pinning them. One of those invisible marksmen the mountains breed. The angle is steep enough that the incoming fire bites down into the ravine like a chisel. Every time someone shifts, the shooter punishes the movement, as if the enemy is watching through a scope and waiting for a shoulder to rise. And then there's the heavy weapon. It's not a roar. It's not a machine gun screaming. It's something steadier, longer bursts, deliberate pauses. The kind of fire that comes from a gun mounted, braced, controlled by a person who has practiced. The medic element came here for a rescue. A sensor team had stopped checking in from a ridge relay site, and intelligence, thin and urgent, suggested one was wounded and pinned. The medics were the only ones close enough to get there before the extraction window snapped shut. Now they're the ones pinned. They carry more medical gear than ammo. Tourniquets, pressure dressings, hypothermia wraps. 4 kits with cold-resistant tubing. Their packs are heavy with life-saving weight, and that weight becomes a curse in a kill box. Kill box. That's the word Ruffy's mind supplies without permission. Low ground. Snow glare. No lateral escape. High ridgeline shooters unseen. The ravine, which felt like cover, is really a funnel. A place to hold them, strip them of options, and let time do the killing. Above, a faint buzzing sound cuts through the wind. Ruffy's eyes flick upward. For a heartbeat he sees it. A dark speck against the white sky, moving with purpose. A small drone, cheap and stubborn, hovering near the ridgeline. It shifts, steadies, then slides sideways like it's adjusting its angle. spotting, guiding, recording. One of the three. The heavy weapon bites again, and Ruffy feels the impacts through the rock, through his gloves, through his ribs. Snow explodes into the air in short, violent fountains. The rock tooth they're hiding behind is being carved down. Casualty, the younger medic says, voice strained. Ruffy leans over the wounded teammate, hands already moving. The man's face is pale, lips blue, blood soaking through the fabric at his thigh. You're gonna be fine, Ruffy lies, because that's what medics do. They build a bridge out of words while their hands do the real work. Another medic, Corporal Sadiq, points up the ravine wall. He's trying to find a route, any route. His eyes are wide, but his movements are careful. Ruffy takes a breath, then another. He lifts his head just enough to catch a glimpse of the ridgeline and maybe, spot the heavy weapon's position. A round smacks the rock inches from his face. Stone chips and snow dust explode, stinging his cheeks. The shot is so perfectly timed it feels like someone reached into the air and slapped him down. They have their range. They have patience. They have control. The enemy is not here to trade shots. They are here to erase a unit. Ruffy presses his forehead against the rock and closes his eyes for half a second. The cold is so intense it's almost clean. Fear tastes metallic, like the inside of a battery. And then, a different sound. Not the rip of automatic fire. Not the crack of the high shooter. A single sharp report, surgical, precise, like the air itself snapping. For half a second, everything goes quiet. The heavy weapon stops mid-burst, as if the hand controlling it has been cut away. Ruffy blinks. The pressure drops. The incoming fire stutters, confused. In that brief slice of silence, he drags the wounded teammate deeper behind the rock and wedges his body over him like a shield. He looks up, scanning the ridge, searching for friendlies. There are none. No silhouettes. No movement. None of their rifles fired. He would have heard it. He would have felt the concussion close by. The younger medic whispers, "Was that us?" "No," Ruffy says. "That wasn't us." Another precise crack. A second threat goes quiet. Somewhere up on the ridgeline, something important stops existing. The ambush blinks, like a predator losing its eyes for a heartbeat. And in that blink, the medic unit gets one thing back. Hope. Hours earlier, at the Snowline outpost, everything had looked routine. Pale sun, hard shadows, a low sky so clear it made you trust it. The kind of day that convinces you the mountains are calm, when really they're just waiting. People moved with tired competence, the kind that comes from repetition and bad coffee. A line of vehicles sat with frost on their hoods. Men and women checked straps, checked seals, checked weapons. Someone warmed hands on a metal mug and stared at the ridges as if trying to see through them. The civilian doctor stood slightly apart. She didn't look like she belonged to the rhythm of the place, and yet she moved through it without hesitation. Practical clothes layered under issued outerwear. A scarf tucked tight. Hair pulled back. Her medical bag sat by her boot, the straps worn, the canvas scuff like it had lived too many winters. Her hands were calm. Not the calm of ignorance. The calm of someone who has already seen what panic does to a human body and decided long ago not to let it win. The unit leader, Lieutenant Cameron, broad shoulders, eyes that never stopped measuring, watched her for a moment, then looked away. Not rude, just busy. Some of the soldiers treated her like extra weight. An outsider, a civilian inserted into their movement plan like an awkward piece of furniture. "Doc's here to make sure we don't sue ourselves," a private muttered under his breath, and a couple laughed. The medics didn't laugh. They'd seen her work. They'd seen her fingers stop bleeding in minutes that would have taken them twice as long. They'd seen her spot frostbite early, recognize shock under a smile, talk someone down from the edge of collapse with a voice that never rose. She had earned their respect the quiet way, by doing the work. Cameron gathered the team for the briefing. His voice carried, clipped and clear. "Since the team went dark near the ridge relay," he said. "Last check-in, 6 hours. We've got an extraction window this afternoon at the landing zone on the North Ridge. We move in, confirm, stabilize, move out. We are not here to clear the mountains. We are here to bring people home." The doctor listened without interrupting. The area has a history of interference, Cameron continued. Comms might get ugly. If radios go down, you stick to hand signals. You stay in visual. No hero moves. We do this as a unit. He looked at each face, then at Hayes, as if making sure she understood that last line. She nodded once. They staged the convoy and rolled out. The terrain turned from outpost hardpack into open snowfields, the kind where the sun turns the surface into a mirror. Ridges rose in the distance like frozen waves. Narrow cuts scarred the slopes, the only places where vehicles could crawl without exposing themselves. Beautiful and dangerous. The kind of landscape that makes you feel small and watched. The doctor rode in the second vehicle, close to the medics. Her bag rested between her boots. She kept one hand on it as if anchoring herself. As they moved, she watched the snow. Not casually, not sightseeing. She studied patterns. Wind crust broken in straight lines. A series of boot prints crossing old drift like someone had walked where they shouldn't. Not the wide, clumsy prints of shepherds. Narrower, intentional. A fresh scrape on a boulder face, rock exposed where snow should have clung. Something had brushed it. Metal, maybe, or pack. And then the quiet. It was too clean, too empty. No distant crack of a hunter's shot. No birds. No signs of the small life that usually insists on existing even in winter. The kind of quiet that means something is holding its breath. She leaned forward, voice low so only the medic beside her heard. "Stop here," she said. The medic blinked. "For what?" "Casualty strap check," she answered, smooth as if it was routine. "I want to tighten the sled harness." He shrugged. "Tell the lieutenant." Cameron wasn't thrilled, but he waved them into a brief halt. The vehicles tucked into what little cover the cut provided. People shifted, adjusted gear, stumped feet to keep blood moving. The doctor stepped out, knelt by a medical sled, and pretended to check straps. Then she lifted her gaze and held it on the ridgeline longer than a civilian should. Her eyes tracked distances instinctively, measuring angles. The way the ridge folded, where a person could lie hidden, where sound would carry in cold air, where glare would blind you. Cameron noticed. He walked up, boots crunching. "Everything okay, doctor?" She kept her voice neutral. "There's fresh movement on the ridgeline. Not ours." Cameron followed her gaze. He saw nothing but snow and rock. "Our marksman will watch it," he said. The designated marksman, Sergeant below, older, calm, looked over and gave a polite half-smile, the kind that says is humoring her. "Snow does weird things," he said. "Tracks can be old." A junior soldier snorted. "Snow ghosts." The doctor didn't react. She just looked away and reached into her pack, fingers brushing something solid inside. A compact, protected case. Hard-sided, sealed, never labeled, kept close like a secret. When the convoy moved again, the doctor's hand stayed near that case, and her eyes stayed on the ridges. They passed a civilian structure, a shack half-collapsed under snow load, weathered with like old bones. It should have been a comfort. Cover. A landmark. Instead it felt watched. The doctor marked it mentally and moved on, because she'd learned long ago that places like that are never just places. They are options. Or traps. When the first shots came, they didn't come like an accident. They came like a hand closing. The unit entered the snowball approach, open glare, minimal cover, moving toward the relay site. The plan was simple. Check the sensor team, stabilize, move to extraction by afternoon. Then the first rounds cracked high and hard, not aimed to kill immediately but aimed to stay. The team instinctively ducked into the shallow ravine because the ravine offered cover from direct line of sight. And the moment they did, the enemy's fire adjusted, tightening, hurting them deeper. Cameron tried to call it in. Base, contact, contact. Static swallowed him. Not the messy, crackling static of weather or terrain. Clean, abrupt, like someone had flipped a switch. He tried another frequency, another radio, another channel. Blank. Radio dead, he shouted. The enemy fire split rolls with terrifying competence. A high shooter pinned heads down from above. Shots snapped into the ravine lip the instant someone moved, each one a reminder. I see you. A lower-angle team raked the ravine mouth, denying retreat. Every time someone tried to crawl back, rounds cut the snow where they would have been. And then the heavy weapons started working their cover like a carpenter's tool. The medics returned fire carefully, but their angles were wrong. They were shooting uphill into glare, into rock shadows, into spaces where the enemy was not. Every shot they fired was a coin tossed into a well. A medic, Sadiq, took a grazing hit while moving to a casualty. Not a dramatic Hollywood wound. A line of tearing pain across his upper arm that bled fast because cold makes blood stubborn and thin. He pressed a gloved hand to it, saw the red smear, and his eyes widened, not from pain, but from what it meant. Blood on white snow is a beacon. Smoke drifted in, maybe from a thrown canister, maybe from a damaged vehicle in the cut behind them, maybe from powder snow kicked up by impacts. It mixed with wind-driven snow and turned visibility into waves. One moment you could see the ridge, the next you were inside a white haze that made the world feel like it was shrinking. Ammo discipline became real. They were not carrying assault loads. They were carrying life-saving loads. Cameron tried to coordinate a breakout, voice sharp. Bound left. Smoke. Move to the rock line. But geometry killed the plan before it could live. Every exit route was covered. Overlapping lanes. The kill box wasn't an accident. It was architecture. The drone reappeared, hovering near the ridge as if curious. The doctor's eyes followed it. She was crouched over a casualty, hands moving. Fingers pressing gauze, tightening a tourniquet. Calm, even as rounds snapped overhead. Her voice stayed low. Steady. Stay with me, she told the wounded man. Breathe. Look at me. But her mind was elsewhere too, tracking the rhythm of enemy bursts. There were patterns. Burst time to movement. Pauses that felt like corrections. The drone shifting, then the heavy weapon adjusting. She noted timing. Not numbers. Not calculations. The simple truth of it. Someone up there was coordinating. A command node. A jammer nearby. Close enough to shut them down cleanly. The heavy weapon began bracketing their cover more aggressively. Impacts chewed snow into exploding mist, knocking powder into their faces, threatening to carve away the last rock that gave them shelter. Time pressure hit like a fist. Extraction was scheduled at the ridge landing zone by afternoon. If they missed it, night would drop, and night in these mountains didn't care about heroism. Night meant colder air, slower movement, more enemy freedom. And then the moral constraint appeared. A shepherd hut sat not far beyond the ravine mouth, half buried in drift. It wasn't empty. Smoke curled faintly from a crack. Someone was inside, civilian life stubbornly existing. Returning fire wildly could punch rounds through that wood. The medics hesitated, because the mission was rescue, not destruction. The enemy didn't hesitate at all. The doctor pressed her palm to a casualty's chest, feeling the fragile rise and fall, and made a decision that felt like tearing her own skin. If no help was coming, if comms were dead, if the enemy had designed this to erase them, then someone had to create the help. Someone had to change the geometry. She looked at Cameron, caught his eye for a heartbeat, then looked away before he could read anything in her face. She shifted closer to Ruffy, voice barely above a whisper. Keep them pinned, she said. Ruffy blinked, startled. What? Keep their heads down, she repeated, calm as if instructing him on bandage placement. If the wind picks up, don't look for me. Ruffy's eyes narrowed. Doctor. She didn't answer. She just moved. The visibility surge came like a gift. Wind whipped powder snow into the air, and the smoke haze thickened for a few seconds until the world blurred. The enemy fire continued, but the rhythm changed, less confident, more probing, as if the drone's feed had lost clarity. The doctor used the surge. She signaled the medic with a quick hand motion. Stay down, stay loud, keep the illusion that everyone is still pinned in the ravine. Then she stripped weight. Not dramatically, efficiently. She pulled bulk gear from her pack, extra medical supplies, heavy items that would slow her, and tucked them behind the rock with a quick, practiced motion. She kept only what she needed, a compact trauma kit, a hypothermia wrap, 2 pressure dressings. The essentials, the minimum. Then she unsealed the protected case. The lid popped with a quiet click. Inside was not a medical device. Inside was a stowed precision capability, compact, meticulously maintained, wrapped against cold and snow. A rifle broken down into tight pieces to fit the case. An optic protected by padding. A small set of tools. Spare magazines. The kind of equipment that doesn't belong in a civilian doctor's pack. She didn't look at it like it was new. She looked at it like it was an old scar. She assembled it fast, but not rushed. Fingers sure. Movements economical. She kept her body low, her breath controlled. No visible vapor bursts. In cold air, even breathing can be a flay. Then she slid away from the cluster of bodies and into the ravine's shadow. Her movement wasn't athletic bravado. It was careful, crawling along crusted snow shadows. Using rock seams. Choosing places where her silhouette wouldn't cut against the bright white. Timing her movement between enemy bursts. The rhythm mattered. The high shooter fired in a pattern, punishing movement. The heavy weapon fired in measured bursts, pausing to adjust. The drone buzzed and shifted. She listened to it all the way a surgeon listens to a heartbeat. Not for drama, for information. She chose a route others wouldn't. A steep, icy side cut that climbed toward higher ground but stayed masked from the enemy's primary overwatch. It was narrow, ugly, and dangerous. The kind of place a soldier loaded with gear would avoid because one slip could break a leg and end a mission. She moved anyway. Halfway up, she felt the first bite of equipment failure. She tapped her optics range aid. Nothing. Cold killed batteries without mercy. A dead battery meant no assistance, no friendly numbers. She exhaled once, slow. Manual holds. Then, judgment. Old skill. She climbed higher, fingers digging into crust, boots finding traction where there was almost none. She scraped her glove on ice and felt skin burn, but she didn't stop. The abandoned shack appeared ahead, the one she'd marked earlier. From this angle it was more ruin than shelter. Weathered boards half collapsed. Snow drifted against the walls like piled bones. She reached it and paused, scanning. Evidence was everywhere if you knew how to look. Fresh packaging tucked under a beam. Scraped snow where someone had knelt. A lens cap half buried near the wall. Tracks that didn't belong to shepherds. Observation point. Someone had been here watching the approach. Waiting. She moved past the shack, using it only as a landmark, and found a ridge seam, an uneven fold in rock and snow that created a narrow perch with a flanking view into the ravine. And there it was. The impossible angle. From below, the ridge looked smooth and inaccessible. From here, it offered a clean line of sight into the kill box. She laid out her packed snow for stability, and built a firing position with what she had. The rifle rested on the pack, her body angled low, minimizing her silhouette. Her scarf tucked tight to stop breath vapor from blooming in front of her face. Below, the medic unit was still trapped, still bleeding time. Above, the enemy was still confident. She watched for behavior, not uniforms. Who signaled? Who controlled the heavy gun? Who corrected fire? Who looked at the drone feed? Force multipliers first. Her heart hammered in her chest, loud enough she imagined it might give her away. But her hands were surging still. The shift from healer to protector locked in, like a door clicking shut. She found the heavy weapon controller first. A figure behind a brace gun, posture slightly forward, shoulders locked. Another figure feeding ammunition or watching the slope. The controller's head moved in small controlled motions, tracking, measuring. She waited through one burst. Through the pause, through the next burst. Then she squeezed. The rifle's report was clean, sharp, different from the surrounding violence. The heavy weapon stopped midstream. The controller collapsed backward as if someone had cut his strings. For half a second, the kill box exhaled. Below, Ruffy looked up, stunned, and used the moment the way medics always use moments. He moved a body. He dragged the wounded deeper. He redistributed gear. He bought seconds. The doctor shifted her position immediately. Small crawl, sidestep, because she knew what happens next. The enemy would notice the absence. They would ask why. And competent enemies don't stay confused for long. She scanned for the jammer. She couldn't see the device itself at first, but she could see the effects. The enemy's coordination remained tight. Movements were still guided. Fire still corrected. That meant the command node was close, feeding information with local comms unaffected by the jam wall aimed at the medic unit. Then she saw it, a short whip antenna sticking up from behind a rock outcrop, just enough to catch the sun. A figure beside it, crouched, head bent. The person wasn't watching the ravine like a shooter. He was watching something in his hands. A small screen. A controller. Drone feed? Maybe. Or jammer settings. Or both. She steadied. She chose the cleanest shot line. No stray rounds into the shepherd hut. No ricochet off rock. And she squeezed. The figure jerked and fell sideways. The antenna wobbled, then disappeared behind the rock. In the ravine, Cameron's radio hissed. Not clear, not stable, but alive. A flicker of comms, broken, partial, just enough for a Bose transmission. Contact, medics pinned, grid, wounded, extraction. It wasn't a conversation. It was a flare fired into the air. But it was something. The enemy adapted fast. The heavy weapon had stopped. The jammer flickered. The drone's behavior changed, sliding away from the ravine and drifting toward the ridge seam where the doctor lay. The high shooter fired 2 probing shots into the rock near her position. Not accurate, but searching. They knew now. A precision shooter was on the flank. They stopped firing wildly and started hunting. 2 climbers appeared on a back ridge spine. Figures moving low, using rock, taking a route that would bring them around behind her perch. They weren't rushing. They were smart. The drone hovered higher, scanning for movement, for heat, for the tiny betrayals of a human body in cold air. Constraints stacked like weights. Ammo limited. Barrel warming. Snow glare making target ID harder. Wind gust pushing bullets subtly at distance. Dead battery forcing manual judgment. She chose restraint. She held fire until she was sure. Because one mistake could punch through wood and into a civilian. Because one mistake could reveal her exact position and end her before the medics could move. She watched the drone handler outspotter now. Another figure near the command node, posture different, head tilting up toward the drone. The handler made a gesture and the drone shifted. She took him. The drone hesitated, drifted, then began to wobble as if unsure where to look. Enemy fire became less accurate, more emotional. Bows snapped into snow where no one was. The discipline cracked. Below, the medics exploited the opening. Cameron shouted orders, using hand signals and short phrases. Move. Smoke. Bound. They popped smoke low, enough to blur lines without creating a big obvious cloud. They moved casualties in bounds, dragging, carrying, sliding bodies across snow with brutal care. The enemy tried to reassert control. A launcher fired and impacts began to bracket the ridge seam near the doctor, snow erupting around her position. Not close enough to kill yet, but close enough to force her to move. She slid down a crusted slope to a second perch, scraping gloves on ice. Snow tried to jam the rifle's action. She cleared it with a quick motion that spoke of familiarity. The climbers were closer now. She could hear crunching footsteps, faint but real. Fear spiked, sharp and hot against cold skin. She forced it down, broke the problem into steps. Find the cohesion point. Break it. Because a group of fighters in an ambush isn't a swarm. It's a machine. Machines have controls. She scanned for the commander, not by rank insignia, by posture, by the way others oriented toward him, by the way fire shifted when he moved his hand. She found him near a rock shelf, slightly elevated, protected, head moving in short, decisive motions. He wasn't firing. He was directing. She steadied. Wind gusted. She waited for it to ease, felt it in her cheek, watched the snow drift pattern. Then she squeezed. The commander collapsed forward, face into snow. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then everything happened. Enemy cohesion broke like ice. Bursts became unsensed. Some fighters hesitated, suddenly without guidance. Others rushed blindly, trying to reclaim momentum. A couple retreated, dragging gear, unsure whether to fight or flee. The kill box lost its teeth. Below, the medics surged. They popped smoke and moved casualties in bounds, reaching a rock line that opened a path toward the extraction route. Cameron looked back once, eyes searching the ridge, as if trying to see the invisible hand that had just saved them. The enemy made one last attempt at a propaganda kill. An RPG team shifted into position near the ravine mouth, trying to angle a shot into the moving medics. The launcher's tube rose. The doctor took them before the rocket could fly. One high-value shot, clean and final. The RPG team folded. The climbers were almost on her now. She could hear them clearly, boots on crust, breath controlled, the quiet of professionals. She didn't stay to be a hero. She broke contact. She slid deeper into the ridge seam, moved low, used rock folds, and descended on a different route, circling toward the medic's withdrawal line. Because the goal was never to win the ridge. The goal was to bring people home. By the time extraction came, the sun had shifted, but the day was still bright, still cruelly clear. Rota wash blasted powder snow into the air, turning the landing zone into a swirling white storm. Medics loaded casualties with exhausted precision, hands moving automatically despite shaking arms. A vehicle pickup would have been quieter, but the airlift was faster, and time was the enemy's last weapon. Ruffy strapped a wounded man down, checked his pulse, leaned close. "You made it," he said. The man's eyes fluttered. He didn't speak, but he breathed. Cameron stood near the edge of the zone, scanning the ridges with a soldier's distrust. He looked like someone who had just seen the mountain blink. They knew someone had saved them. They still didn't know who. Then the doctor appeared from the tree line of rock and snow, stepping into the Rota wash like she belonged there. Her scarf snapped in the wind. Her outerwear was dusted white. Her face was calm. Only her hands betrayed her. They shook now, small tremors that arrived after the work was done, like the body finally allowing itself to feel what it had been forced to ignore. She didn't celebrate. She didn't look for praise. She moved straight to the casualties, checked bandages, verified pulses, adjusted straps, returning to healer mode as if nothing else was allowed. Cameron walked up, eyes fixed on her. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if unsure what words fit a moment like this. The debrief came later, inside the outpost where the heater rattled and the air smelled like fuel and wet wool. Intelligence laid it out with grim clarity. The ambush hadn't been random. It had been designed. The enemy had wanted a propaganda victory, capturing or killing a medic unit, filming it, proving they could isolate and erase rescue forces at will. They'd also wanted something tangible, a device or intel from the Ridge Releo sensor site. The drone had been there to confirm targets and collect footage. The jammer had been there to cut the unit off cleanly and prevent quick response. They'd rehearsed lanes, pre-sighted fire, timed bursts. They expected no precision counter from a civilian presence. That was a mistake that cost them. Cameron finally asked, quietly, "Why were you carrying that?" The doctor stayed at her hands for a moment, then looked up. "I used to be trained," she said, voice flat, without drama. "Long time ago, before I became this." "A doctor," Ruffy said softly. She nodded once. "I left it behind. I wanted to only fix what was broken, not break more." The room stayed quiet, because everyone understood the contradiction. She hadn't won a fight for glory. She chose violence to protect life, and that choice sat heavy in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. The junior soldier who joked about snow ghosts earlier didn't meet her eyes. His face was red, not from cold, from shame. He didn't apologize with words. He just stood a little straighter, a little quieter, like he'd learned something he couldn't unlearn. Cameron's respect shifted, visible as a physical thing. Not reluctant anymore. Absolute. "You saved them," he said. She didn't answer immediately. Outside, the mountains stood bright and indifferent, ridges sharp against the sky. The snow reflected sunlight so hard it forced you to squint, as if the world itself demanded you look away. She finally spoke, voice low. "I didn't save anyone alone," she said. "They kept each other alive. I just changed the angle." Later, when the outpost settled into its uneasy calm and the wounded slept under blankets, she stepped outside. The snowlight was pale now, softer, but still present. The place where she'd taken the shots was invisible from here. A seam in rock, a fold in the ridge, a patch of white that looked like every other patch of white. She stayed at it for a long time. Not proud, not haunted, just aware. Then she turned back toward the building, toward the warmth, toward the wounded who needed hands that didn't shake. Identity, she understood, wasn't a title. It was what you did when the radios went dead and the kill box closed and the only thing left was the work. And the final truth settled in her chest, heavy and quiet as falling snow. Sometimes the only way to keep a promise to save lives is to take one away.